Good morning. My name is Sarah Dobson. I'm the newly appointed Provincial Superior for the English province of the CJ.
And hello, I'm Gemma Simmons, and I'm a member of the English province and am in charge of the Community House in Cambridge.
We both looked at the question that are about the issues that are most alive for us in our province right now. I had two basic ideas, and the first one is to do with relationships between the province members and potentially between us and future members. The question of how we live our call fully and how we support each other in love and encouragement to live our vocation, and how we build each other up. I think that's my first alive issue. Over to you, Gemma.
Well, within my community, we worked with this together, and we looked at these issues under the heading of the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. With regard to poverty, we took as our standpoint the fact that we live in a world where millions don't have enough to eat. And therefore, thinking from that perspective, we thought that we needed to look very carefully at the way in which we live a lifestyle that is consistent with the vow of poverty, how that supports and is in tune with our ministries. So we wanted to look at our province's use of its property and assets, its resources, both in terms of human beings and buildings and investment, and skills and employment. And we asked ourselves, what is the future vision of the province? And of course, this is in itself a vocations question as well, because anyone coming to look at living a life with us is asking such a question. So that's the first heading under poverty.
My second answer to the most alive issues is overlaps with Gemma's, and it's to do with the future and our preparations for the future. And I see that mainly falling into three areas. The first is to do with the preparation and the thinking around union with the IBBM, and the fact that we will need and want new structures and patterns of life when we are one institute. The second area of the future that I'm aware of, very aware of, is that we will be fewer in this country, in this part of the world, at least in this province, however this province looks. And therefore, we need to look at how we can continue and keep alive the vision of Mary Ward and our charism so that it can live on. And the last area regarding the future, I think, again, it's overlaps with something Gemma said, it's very important to me, is how we can refocus and channel our financial, property and human resources to best, I suppose, live out the dream of Mary Ward and live out our commitment to all the areas that she saw as so important.
So in my group, because we looked at poverty first, we then looked at chastity, and we see a direct correlation between giving our whole heart's love to Christ and to his mission in the world. So we asked ourselves about mission and ministry and relationship, and where we might move as a province in a post-COVID world, how we might discern where we are in relation to the local and also to the wider community. We're aware that there have been huge and profound changes within society in Britain in the last couple of years, both in terms of the pandemic and in terms of Brexit, and what that has actually created in Britain in terms of perhaps a resistance to difference, a resistance to foreign cultures. And we want to make a real commitment to be open to the outsider, to be open to people who are different, who look at the world differently, Migration is a huge question in Britain, with thousands of people trying to sail across the sea to land in Britain. For us, that is a very big question, and we want to know how to respond to it as people whose foundress sailed across the sea to start a new life. So for this and all our ministries, we see Mary Ward and her values at the root and center of how we live our life of inclusive loving, acceptance of the other through our vow of chastity.
Okay, Gemma, I think you've got something else for the burning issues most alive in the province.
Okay, so the third issue that was very alive within my community comes under the heading of obedience, and how we are listening attentively to the voice of the Spirit, not only as individuals, but as a province, particularly at this time with regard to union and the joining with other Mary Ward sisters across the world. So we were looking at how we think we might build structures of leadership in a very new and different looking Mary Ward family. And we asked ourselves how ready we are for merging with cultural and language differences, and even cultural differences in places that have the same language. So we're very aware of needing to do some work together as individuals and as a province with regard to being open to difference and open to change.
Thank you. So is that, I think that's most of what we want to say on the...
I think it is. I mean, the only thing I would say was that we had as a sort of final point that all of this has a huge relevance for us as the English province with regard to possible new vocations, that these are questions we need to answer in order to be ready to receive the women of today who are seeking a religious vocation. So every one of the things I've said is a vocations question, as well as a question about religious life.
Okay, I think that's absolutely right. Gemma, would you like to start with your reflections on the second question about issues?
Surely. I mean, in some senses, what we thought were burning issues or key issues within the province are also key issues within the wider world, because it's very difficult to divide things that are just at-home issues and things that are out there in the world issues. So we know that COVID has unmasked, both globally and locally in Britain, the huge economic divide that there is between those who easily have access to goods, to services, to things like education, job opportunities, and those who don't. And so poverty in all its forms, the poverty of the migrant, but also the poverty of the person who is British and has always been at the bottom of the ladder. These are more than ever urgent issues for us to look at within our own country, but also more globally. We also listed under that the whole issue of climate change and how we might change our own lifestyle as a province and be much more radical about responding to the climate issues, but how we might help people through the gospel, through our ministries, to see climate change as a gospel issue, as a Christian issue. And again, we saw issues around education and who has access, what children and young people have access to the internet, for instance, and how they're able to communicate, who is a partner in the big global conversation and who is still being excluded from the global conversation. These are things we see as very important wider issues, both within the province, but also outside it in the wider world.
Okay, I think that was your three. I've got really two with a kind of a theme that goes over them both. And the first would be the whole issue of climate change and its implications, ecological awareness, and the need for a greater understanding, both each of us individually, but each of us as individual members of our society. and as people with not a huge amount of power, but certainly some amount of education and influence in that field. The second area, which I think probably is around for us as it is for many parts of the world, is the issue of the pandemic and potentially what the situation post-pandemic, if we can call it that. We're not there yet. And I put the word recovery, but actually I think I mean it's not just about recovering what we had before, it's about finding new ways. And there are many, many people in our society, as in all societies, who have suffered during the pandemic, financially, but also loss, grief, abandonment, loss of livelihood. And I think my sense is that healing and reconciliation are very, very important in our society in the UK at the moment. Those who have benefited, because undoubtedly some have, and those who have lost out may be enabled to come together, and that our government and our civil authorities may promote healing and reconciliation in those areas. So that's a kind of, I think that's a general one. I think Gemma mentioned Brexit. It's an area that's caused a great deal of division in our country, and I think continues to. And it's very important for us as a global institute that it's a symbolic cutting off of something which for us should be connection. So.
And I think there's also something that in this time, for a variety of reasons, people have lost trust. I think they've lost trust in leadership at a national level. You know, I think round Mary Ward's Institute, some of us live in countries where the leadership has done very well and has been able to show good leadership qualities, but some of us have lived in countries where there has been rather poor leadership. And for people to recover trust, I think, not only trust in institutions, but trust in the church, or trust in those of us who try and speak the gospel in some way to them, a gospel of hope, a gospel of new beginnings. And I would hope that whatever we can do, we can open up conversations where people can talk about how hurt they've been by the loss of trust and what their hopes might be in that respect.
Okay, I made the mistake of not timing this, so I have a feeling we might be close, if not over our 15 minutes, but
Okay.
I think we probably should stop there.
Right, let's do that.
And we will see each one of you listening to us on screen over the next 6 weeks or so. Thank you very much, Gemma.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.